There are some common mistakes that beginning programmers tend to make when they first start using if-else statements. So I want to go over some of those in this video. So the first mistake is creating unnecessary if blocks. So say you were prompting the user for a number between 1 and 10. After you got that number, then your first instinct may be to check if the number is less than 1, then print that the input's invalid, and then check if the number is greater than 10, then print if the input is invalid. In this case, notice that our output is the same in both cases. I'm not saying specifically it's too small, it's too large, I'm just saying it's invalid. And if that's what our goal is, then a better way to write this would be to use a compound Boolean expression where we check both cases in one line of code. And where this is useful is more than likely, in this above case, we copied and pasted that second identical line. Well, what if there was a bug in it? Well, now we have 2 bugs in just one. So anytime you have identical code, you want to start thinking about ways to consolidate those. There's lots of techniques to do that. And one way is, if you have multiple conditions, check them all at once if you want to do an identical thing in all the cases. The next common mistake is using unnecessary variables. Now, this doesn't just apply to if statements, but it's not uncommon to see something like this. You create a Boolean isInput even that is set to the result of this Boolean expression. So num mod 2 equals 0, that check returns true or false depending on whether or not num is even. And so then you have a Boolean variable that you can use as part of your if statement. A simpler way to do this is to just put the actual Boolean check in your if statement. Unless you want to keep this result, which more than likely you don't, because in this case you don't really care after you do that check whether or not it's even, so there's no reason to store that value in a variable. And the third example we'll see here is a case where you're checking to see if a number is negative, and if it is, you change it to its absolute value, and then you print twice the number and the square of the number. So here, if the number is less than 0, we multiply it by -1 to change it to its absolute value, and then we do our print statements. And otherwise, we just do the print statements. Well, notice we have 2 bits of code that are identical. We're going to do this code in any case, so there's no reason for this to be inside the if condition at all. The if condition will just change num's value. Then, once we're out of that if block, num is an appropriate value. Either it's the same if it was positive, or if it's negative, we've changed it. So now we can just have one set of print statements that handle all the cases, because this code is applicable to every case, not just one or the other. Now, I want to say that none of these things are necessarily wrong, but using good practice helps you avoid bugs, and it also simplifies your code. And the simpler your code is, the easier it is to work with. In fact, you actually don't need an if condition here at all. If I set num to its absolute value using the absolute value function that's available in the math class, then I could just set num to its absolute value and then use it. Sometimes you don't even need an if condition at all. So again, always be thinking of ways to simplify your code. The less code you write, the more likely it is to be correct.